Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, a sprinkling of philosophy, organizing psychology, and revolutionary thinking. My name is 4AS, and this is my co-host, Mr. E. So, Mr. E, how are you going today?
I am very well, 4AS. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, and I can't forget our other co-host, Kareem, the resident AI explorer. Kareem,
hmm
who is the dream. How you doing today?
Good, man. Good. How can I not be doing good after that hype up,
Yeah, I
man?
know. What an introduction.
Love
Bam.
the dramatic effect with it.
Well, the topic for today, boys, is AI and the education system.
Mm.
So, look, Kareem, I know that you have your thoughts, but I thought I might at least posit to the panel here today
To the
um,
panel.
is that obviously up until recently, a lot of society has kind of structured itself via standardized systems or standardized testing. And the I guess the fable or the analogy that's always been used to criticize like that sort of standardized testing system was the idea of a professor that's standing in front of all of these different animals. You know, you have the monkey, you have the elephant, you have the fish, and you have a whole range of other animals. So what the professor says to them is goes, okay, everyone, we're about to do a test. The test is everyone climb that tree. And, you know, the monkey does it with flying colors, and it's impossible for the fish to do it. And in that analogy, the monkey thinks he's the smartest person in the room, and the fish thinks they're the dumbest person in the room. And what the analogy is supposed to show is that obviously everyone has different strengths, and yes, some people might be like the monkey and naturally have the strengths in order to do standardized testing. Um, and others might be like the fish, whether they're, I don't know, something, let's say, they have dyslexia or something like that, and they don't have the same advantages in order to do standardized testing like somebody else. Okay, well, I guess what I want to posit to the panel, like one, uh, in a world where uh, you know, with standardized testing and all of that, in an AI and education world, does standardized testing suddenly become obsolete? And two, you know, how does that affect adult as well as children learning? So yeah, what are your thoughts, boys?
I've got a fair bit to unpack on this, unless Mr. E wants to go first. Or...
I might let you go, and then I might interject where I see fit. You
Okay.
go for it, Kareem.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess, like, in terms of answering your question, I think it makes sense to just take a step back and sort of ask, you know, what are some of the assumptions that we're relying on to build this world. And I think, you know, when I take it back and focus on the purpose of the education system, particularly in primary and secondary schools, the idea is that a person should be able to leave school with a set of capabilities or competencies that will help them navigate the outside world and theoretically lead to an improved quality of life.
Yeah.
So that's where stuff like numeracy and literacy, you know, why there's such a big focus in schools on making sure that children understand basic concepts around literacy and numeracy, and to some extent things like critical thinking, problem solving, analytical skills. I imagine there's range for a whole lot of improvement there, but there's a fair bit of research there to sort of link people who have received an education in these basic things and their overall quality of life. Like, we know that people with higher literacy rates, in general, are going to lead a higher quality of life than the people that might not have had the opportunity to learn those things. So once we've got sort of, I guess, you know, the core capabilities that people should emerge from the educational system with, we need to start thinking about how do we know whether or not a person has actually reached that capability. Like if we're trying to teach them something in school, how do we know whether or not they actually learned what we were trying to teach them? Now, I could debate all day the inadequacies of the current assessment system, within educational institutions, but I think the part that doesn't get enough attention, particularly with questions around standardized testing, is how are we going to be able to compare the results of student A with student B? And when it comes to what classes they're enrolled in or what subjects they're taking, do we have a way where we can differentiate between students? For say example, one student might be learning something at a faster rate than other people. Do we have any type of indication as to how we can identify who might be doing better versus who might not be doing as well, so that we can apply more resources in that direction? So this is where I think like standardized testing is actually quite useful, because it helps people figure out, okay, where should I be putting extra attention to make sure that all learners are going to wind up being able to meet that core set of capabilities that we want them to leave school with. So,
can I just ask, just for clarification purposes, when you say like there's a certain level of kind of literacy or comprehension skills or any other type of metric, where do these metrics kind of come from? Like, who sits down kind of and says, this is what an 18-year-old should be able to achieve once they come out of the education system?
Yeah, I don't know as much about the specifics of how they can. I could speculate on it.
Well, yeah, please. That's what I'm more asking. Like, is that like a body?
You're not going to hold me to it. Yeah.
I won't hold you to it. But is it like a government thing? Is it like a body, or is it just like intellectuals, like academics, academia? Right? That's kind of like, oh, this is the standard that 18-year-olds should be at the moment.
No, I imagine the analysis of it is sort of like much more detailed in terms of, let's take a group of students around this age. As a whole, what is this group of students able to complete, like capability wise? That way, we'll get an understanding what's the average level for this particular demographic or this group of students. Right. So I understand the concern, because sometimes it feels like people might be pulling out these standards out of thin air, and there's nothing.
Well, I'm more wondering, like, what's the implication? Like, I'm sorry to reduce it to this, like I always do, but like the education system is kind of a reflection of, like, let's say, broader society, and like from kind of, a standpoint from, let's say, the Industrial Revolution onwards, like school was very much structured in a way that prepared people kind of for the workforce, kind of thing. So like school, if you look at school with the lens of it's preparing people to be good employees and productive members of society, then like you could very easily draw upon what type of level of literacy someone needs to have a very standard style of work, or what level of comprehension they would need based on potentially what type of employment they would be engaging in and stuff. That's why I was just wondering, like, kind of I wonder where they set the levels now of what's acceptable for an 18-year-old to have as a level of comprehension or a level of arithmetic or whatever needed to be, I guess, a functioning member of society, if you know what I mean.
And there's also the other part of this that might have prompted my initial question, is, well, I get I find with both university as well as secondary and primary education is that standardization equals value. So like, hey, can so-and-so student, are they able to tick the box of these sort of skills and do these sort of things when they come out of, this learning course, et cetera, et cetera. And because there's that standardized equals value mindset, I feel like there's a lot of valuable skills that are left out of that standardized process. Yeah. Like, for example, I can't remember in high school learning how to do my taxes. I don't remember in high school learning how to, change a tire. And those are incredibly useful skills. Sure, might be uh, there might be other ones that I'm thinking of, but those are the ones that kind of immediately come to mind. But I'm sure they would be valuable skills for someone to learn in their life, but they're not standardized in the more traditional sense. So they kind of left to wither on the vine, or at least they're left for the family in order to initiate those sort of skills.
Mm. Well, I think one really important consideration of what to include in an educational system versus what to exclude, because I imagine that's going to be an ongoing debate. Like we're always going to have limitations in terms of what education we can provide to, like how much curriculum we can actually squeeze into kindergarten to year 12. There's only going to be so much content we can actually include in that. So making a decision and prioritizing what types of education we want to be able to provide to students is going to involve a navigation of those priorities. Now, I'd argue that the capabilities we should be focusing on the most are the ones which people are going to be using most often once they leave school. So again, putting it through that rate, like, have you, when was the last day that you didn't read? Or when was the last day where you didn't have to infer anything from the numbers that you were reading?
Yeah.
So, if you think about it on that level, like those, like literacy and numeracy skills are things that you could be potentially using every day, regardless of what your work environment is. Something like, say, doing your taxes or changing a tire. While, I agree, these are kind of like essential life skills to have and would be really useful to have in your back pocket. Think about it this way, like doing your taxes, technically you're only going to do that once a year. Like, as complicated as it may be, there's limited opportunities for you to practice whatever skills you've actually acquired. Same sort of deal with changing a tire. Like, how often do you have to change a tire? Even if you had to do that like once a year as well, again, there's still limited opportunities to actually practice whatever it is that you've learned. So I think there has to be a priority from educational institutions around this is the stuff that we anticipate you needing the most.
Yeah, and that's why I really want to try kind of, just for myself, conceptualize or get an understanding of what is this baseline that all these people agree on, which is what you need. Like, does it come out of a need to have a second grade reading level because you need to be able to, read the word stop on a stop sign so you don't get hit by a car or something like that? Is that enough? Or like reading the kind of the messages on, a board at the train station, is that enough for you to get by in the world? Or if we're talking about entering into the workforce, obviously reading like one word or like a very simple sentence is not going to be enough for you to be a functioning member of society. So like, it'll be interesting to see kind of where this kind of standard comes from, as in like, what is an acceptable level for someone to have, literacy or numeracy skills. Like, that'll kind of really dictate the conversation in terms of whether a standardized test is important or not, or whether you can do it in some other way. Like, I understand and I fully agree with the idea that you need some time of standardized testing to see if everybody's met the baseline. Because if people aren't meeting a baseline, like the standard, then like, what's the point of the education system in a society like ours? Like, what are we producing here?
Maybe let me put a different spin on it, because living in the AI era now, where we fully anticipate AI is going to have a huge impact on the educational system.
Massive.
It makes sense to, I guess, start discussing what the possibilities are, particularly with regards to using AI in assessments or assessing any type of competency or capability. But the opportunities are endless, and I think one of the things that sort of gets mentioned the most within these circles is what they call personalized learning paths. So that means that the AI has done an assessment of your current capability level, whatever the field is, and based on what it's figured out about where you're up to in skill development, or what you might be struggling with, or what you might need a bit more focus on, even the stuff that you do really well. The personalized learning path involves taking that information into consideration and designing a structured curriculum based on the evolution of your capabilities, or the things that we want you to learn. Now, how much does that personalized learning path look like what might otherwise be taught in schools, versus how much is it sort of designed to supplement school-based learning, versus in the future, how much can we actually rely on that to be able to facilitate students learning by themselves? Like, is the nature of a school and the role of teachers going to evolve once we have these hyper-personalized learning paths? And I think that from that perspective, one argument is we should be focused on the student's progression instead of comparing them across other students, because the only enemy you have to beat is who you are today. So if we're putting it through that lens, then creating individualized assessments at different points along a learner's path, those assessments might not be standardized, and they'll look very different from student to student, depending on what they're working on. But I think stuff like that enables the AI to be able to build on top of what they've already learned, adjust the curriculum on the fly if that has to be done, and be able to actually track progress, track metrics across time that demonstrate a person's evolution as they're going through their learning journey. So if you're comparing yourself to yourself, like AI would be quite useful in terms of doing that. But the assessments that the AI generates aren't necessarily going to translate between students. So there's a few different ways of approaching the assessment question, and how valuable that assessment is.
See, this is why I was asking before, because if the standard, literacy rate for an 18-year-old when they leave school is this arbitrary figure that is just I don't know, decided upon by every English teacher in the country. And they just say, hey, we want all students to be at this level. Then it's kind of, it is kind of arbitrary then, because this is why is that the socially necessary standard at that time? Is it just because the English teachers are aspirational, or maybe they have really low expectations because they're ashamed of all of their students? Or there's some government body out there that's has talked to all these peak body or these industry, I don't know, has spoken to advisory groups, and all these advisory groups are saying, look, we need better workers out there. And when McDonald's hires all of these kids to work at McDonald's, they can't read the warnings and they can't follow the instructions properly. So we want them to have this level of education and comprehension and literacy and all this sort of stuff, so they can be better workers. If it's coming from a standard place like that, then you could kind of argue for some level of standardization, and AI could assist with that. But if it's completely arbitrary, then what you're talking about with AI being used to create individualized educational patterns is a complete and revolutionary overhaul of our education system. Imagine a system that was based on the AI that you're speaking about, Kareem, where at the end of your education, you've been monitored by AI for the last 10 years, let's just say, for hypothetical reasons. And it's hey, you, MysterE, you were here 10 years ago and you've increased by this percentage level. We've wanted everyone to show an increase in their learning by this percentage point, and you've beaten that percentage point. So compared to where you were 10 years ago, you've beaten our expectations of what we want in the education system, which is overall improvement by this much. And if everyone's improving by this much, then our education system is doing A-okay. It doesn't matter what the final test score is or where you are in relation to other people or some kind of baseline. It's just like, you've progressed this much, congratulations, now get out of here, like kind of thing. That would be a complete game changer, and AI can do that. AI literally has the capacity to individualize education for every child or every student in an entire country, if not the entire planet.
I'm kind of glad you brought this up, MysterE, because that was going to be, I think that was tying into my original question, is that for both, I guess, the primary and secondary system, as well as university / adult learning, like, what do you guys think AI will be like? Will it be equally as useful to the primary and secondary education system as well as adult learning, or do you think it's going to favor one over the other? Because it would be nice to know in, say, for example, 20 or so years' time, if instead of our eyeballs being on Jeff Bezos's shopping cart as to what we're going to get next on Amazon, but rather we, I don't know, revolutionize the education system where, say, a kid that's interested in a kid that's interested in biology, and there's a individualized system where it goes like, oh, you've learned about this about bacteria. Would you like to know more? Like he or she keeps on delving down the rabbit hole, and then it's like, well done, Jane Smith. We think you should be a marine biologist based on everything that you've studied. And then, I guess in that sort of idealized world, based on where we are now in, say, 20 or 30 years' time, adult compared to primary and secondary, equal amount of revolutionizing the system, or one's going to do better compared to the other?
Yeah, I think with this one that we're going to see the revolutions across the tertiary education space first. So at universities with online courses, with stuff like LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, like there's a whole bunch of free educational platforms. If you want the certificate, you got to pay more for it,
what?
But technically, you can get the education for free.
You can get the education.
You just don't get a certificate.
So Kareem, what you're saying is that the problem is the profit motive. Is that what you're saying?
I was waiting for him to say it, but he wouldn't do it.
Look, I think. I think this is probably a function of the system, if nothing else. I think that one of the things that's going to get prioritized in an education system in the world that we live in today is, does this education help me make more money? So whether it be from, okay, this is how you start your side hustle thing and make videos on YouTube, or versus these are the skills you're actually going to need in your specialized industry, and you're competing with other people that are trying to get into the same industry. So on some level, we have to know what you're capable of, because we've got to be able to compare across. But I think it's going to be sometime before we see like the true power of AI really embraced in primary and secondary educational settings. I think there's going to be a bit of a lag behind, and I think that the way that it was quite a compelling vision that you painted in terms of being able to take all that data that's acquired through school and have that fed into, okay, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because that would be incredibly useful. But I think on some level you're still going to have to cover like how did I do with the core stuff, the non-negotiable parts of school, the stuff that again, like heavily researched, we know leads to a more productive member of society, or we know leads to a higher quality of life. I think at the moment that the place that we're in terms of AI integration is that Even from students themselves, there's this focus on, can I use ChatGPT to get around this homework question, or
See, I think that's
that's
incredibly liberating in a way. Like, I remember when like ChatGPT kind of dropped like a couple of years ago. Like, maybe not for Australia's #1 AI explorer, but like for the rest of us plebs, like everyone was kind of like, yeah, we're going nuts about like this thing that, could write a letter for you or you could have a conversation with. And then like there were the people in like kind of the university, so your tertiary education level that you were speaking about, that were just like, oh my God, we're never going to get an essay ever again that's not plagiarized. And you're like, well, is it plagiarized? Like, if you ask AI to generate it for you, isn't that like more personalized? It's just not coming from the student. And like they were all freaking out about how they're going to handle this influx of like, computer generated, homework or assessments and all this sort of stuff. And like what they were going to do as institutions to kind of battle this. But like, I think that was kind of the wrong way of looking at it. Like, it was not just the fact that this thing, like they were typing in and being like, can you generate this essay? Because for anyone that's used ChatGPT before, unless you're good at prompting, it's not going to give you what you want. So you actually have to have a dialogue with it, read its responses, refine it, and you actually have to start to get a hold and a grip of what it's feeding you before you can get something really of value out of it. There is an interaction there. And so like, if people are just like, oh, you just say the magic word and AI does whatever you want, like, like just instantaneously, I think that's wrong. There's a dialogue, there's a dance that you do with AI, and that will, whether or not, like, it's ultimately conducive to a solid education, and at least makes students interact with the content of what they're supposed to be studying to some degree, which they might not have ever done before in the same way. So it's like, it's not a bad thing, I see. And like, they can learn from the AI as well. Like, you can ask it simple questions and it's going to give you some pretty good answers, so you're not sitting there scratching your head. It's incredibly efficient in that regard, in my perspective anyway. It's much better than a Google search, that's for sure.
I was talking to 4IS about this recently, about my journey with education and AI, in terms of like the development of my writing skills. I think it'd be useful to share just some of my observations along the way. So for me, I had a story to tell, decided I wanted to get better at writing, decided I would use Claude to help me get better at writing. So, in the beginning, I was just getting feedback on my work, and it would make suggestions which weren't always the best suggestions, but, it didn't have a whole lot of context. And I was kind of using it using the feedback that I got from it to sort of, grow and evolve, by myself. When I finally came around to constructing something specialized, that was, wasn't just giving me feedback anymore, was actively invested in my growth as a writer. That's when it sort of developed, a tailored curriculum. It helped me figure out, where I want to focus my energy, what sort of time do I have to dedicate to it, like what does it look like over the longer term. And what I've been doing with that is, periodically I've been coming back to it at the end of every session and just saying, can you give me a summary of what we've learned today and how my performance went. And the way it's constructed on Claude is that it'll write an artifact. So it's not part of the main chat. It'll create like a separate file that I can either download or I can add to the project. And if I add it to the project, then what happens is the knowledge in that document now becomes a part of the knowledge base for that particular project. So it's getting an update as to how I'm going, in terms of the lessons that have been structured. That update helps it figure out if we need to make any changes to the curriculum or not. But having those clear sort of signposts and that gradual progression in development helps the AI how to figure out how to actually personalize, that writing part.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I'm in a place where, again, relevant to the standardized questioning test, I don't know how far I've progressed as a writer, because I don't have any standardized metrics to compare myself, to other writers. I've only got, records of my own progress. So in my case, standardized assessment would be useful for sort of core writing skills. But there is room for another layer of assessment on top of that might be unique to my individual needs. So, like, let's say if there's a particular style of writing that I'm doing, or a particular thing that I want to be able to do with my writing, it can actually construct the assessments based on that additional context. So I think, there's still going to be a need for, those core competencies and that standardized assessment, but the added layer of, like, what else is worth measuring here? How can we plot it over time? Is going to be a highly individual and unique experience.
Yeah, and I think it also applies, like, in an education sense, maybe not in a autodidact sense, like someone who is self-taught, but like maybe in an educational system sense. It's not only just for the students, I find, it's also for the teachers themselves. Like, let's just say you have a class full of, like, I don't know, 20 students, and like they're all at different levels on a particular topic. Or let's say, like, they're at different reading levels, right? You could have a text that, like, maybe you want them to study, and like they're in grade 9, and like not everyone's at a grade 9 reading level, but the text is. You could feed it into like ChatGPT or something like that, and be like, okay, ChatGPT, I've got like 5 kids in the class that are at a grade 7 level of reading, and some, unfortunately, that are at a grade 5 level. Can you reproduce this text at these grade levels? Not just 9, but like, let's say, 7 and 5. And so, like, you could basically change the course structure within that class to reflect the standards, or the level at which your students are at. And now, like, a teacher, traditionally, if they had to do that themselves, they probably would have to work the entire weekend or something like that.
Yeah.
It'd take ages for them to, like, digest the text and then, like, reproduce it in a form that's acceptable to different levels in the classroom. But like ChatGPT might do that in, like, a few seconds or something like that. And like, there you go. Like, you have just been able to personalize learning to allow, like, more accessibility to students in your class. And you've made the teaching process, so the educating process, as opposed to the education process, like, a whole lot more efficient. And like, by, I guess, extension of that, you're making education generally like better, more improved, because you're able to kind of target people appropriately within your classroom. Like, the way that AI could be used in, like, just education kind of generally, like, for all the players in the game, is just like, it's just massive. Like, I don't even know if we could put it potentially or probably conceive of all of it, all the options that are on the table potentially.
But you kind of do raise a good point, though, MysterE, is that the fact within any education system, it's one of the things that people always say, like, when you're in school or tertiary education systems, it's the teacher, it's the lecturer, it's the um, uh, tutor that goes the extra mile or is passionate about a subject and that sort of thing. That makes or breaks your love or your interest in a certain subject.
Yeah.
And I guess if you have these capabilities of AI that is able to tailor the needs in the classroom, even in that kind of baseline example of, hey, not everyone's at the same reading level, let me tailor this text so everyone can access that, and then we can all as a class discuss, the themes of the book and all of that.
Yes, because everyone can join in that discussion then, right?
Yeah, and the teacher going above and beyond in that sort of way could be the difference between a kid, especially if they're at that fifth grade reading level, it could be the difference of them enjoying English or not.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you going to say, Kareem?
Along the same lines, actually, like about the role of the teacher in the classroom. I was just going to paint a more detailed picture on top of the vision MysterE shared with us around having sort of AI be able to prepare a teacher, for classroom. One of the constraints that we're working with at the moment is what they call context window. So that's the amount of information that the AI can store as relevant within the current conversation. So the context window changes for different platforms, but the reason why it's important here is because if it were possible for, let's say, a school-based AI that the students connected up with and they were able to rely on it, to help them with their homework and stuff and do assessments. It would be theoretically be possible with a long enough context window to have a student's entire school history be readily available and able to be dissected. But having a teacher, let's say if they've got 30 of these entire school history assessments, being able to work out individually where each student is up to. What their strengths and development areas might be, what their engagement has looked like. Actually, in my research, I came across one school that's actually using detecting facial expressions on students in order to gauge engagement with the material. So it just
like Hume AI.
In a similar kind of way. Yeah,
So they got a camera in the classroom and they're watching the kids, kind of thing.
Yeah. So I believe it was a Chinese school that implemented this, but with that kind of data, what you would be able to do is tailor your lessons for maximum engagement. You'd be able to work out the parts of the lessons that were not engaging versus the parts that were. Do more of the stuff that is working, reframe or I guess adapt the stuff that's not working and using those familiar methods. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that can be done in this space. But I was just picturing it, from the teacher's perspective, if they rocked up and the lesson plan was already devised by the AI, had already taken into account every single student and where they're at and whether or not they did their homework last night. It would be far easier to.
It would know that. It would know if I hadn't done my homework.
Well, let's again, within the context of the platform. If it was if it was a platform that schools used, that was also available to students like outside of school, that was able to help them with their homework. If it became a platform on which you actually had to submit your homework. Or this is where you're going to be doing your assessments. If it could be that integrated type of platform that really supports a student's journey or their learning experience.
Surely it wouldn't be hard to, maybe what the AI could do is it's like, oh, you've come into this English class and you've been learning about Othello, for example. Tell me in this scene what Desdemona and Othello said. Tell me this, tell me that, and then it's like, okay, the kid's done his homework, or no, it's very obvious the kid hasn't done his homework, and then you can kind of go from there.
You could probably introduce like a brief set of questions that's specifically designed, just to figure out whether or not you did your homework, and it probably wouldn't take long either. It'd be interesting to see what it comes back with on that one. But I think for me, where I think that the focus really needs to go is, in educational institutions, there's a huge focus on the knowledge that's being imparted, To some extent, there's a focus on what skills you're able to demonstrate, capabilities or competencies. But I think a huge part of assessment tends to focus on whether or not you can recall the relevant knowledge that you've been taught. Now, in some cases, let me take being an astronaut, for an example. Even though an astronaut might have access to encyclopedia, ChatGPT, any source of knowledge that they want, via communication as well, there are still some things that an astronaut needs to be able to recall instantly for them to be able to do their job, particularly in high pressure situations where they don't have enough time to sort of go back and reference the material. So working out what knowledge is actually essential to be able to utilize the skill is important, and it's an important function of educational institutions. But capabilities comprise of more than just knowledge. So capabilities, if we're looking at it from an organizational perspective, encompass attitudes, encompass behaviors, encompass knowledge as well. But there might be other sort of unique skills that fall within a capability. So I think if we get fixated on testing for knowledge, which is less and less relevant in today's day and age, because the access to knowledge that we have, the barriers to getting that knowledge are reducing considerably. We can look up whatever we want now. We can jump on Perplexity, as I keep plugging. But
I knew you were going to say Perplexity. I knew it. I wish I'd put money on it before that.
MysterE, we have to start doing a bingo card for Kareem. Perplexity is on there. If we remove the profit motive, I'm sure there's more we can think about.
But Perplexity was important in this one because it's like a fact-checking one. It's not just hey, let me give you an answer, but it's supposed to be accurate.
It's something you can actually engage with. But
well, like I must say, I have come across this. It felt at the time very dystopian, but like this video footage in China of like this classroom where they not only are monitoring the kids' faces, so they got a camera at the front of the class. There was like a childcare center where they were doing this kind of thing, and like they're really little kids. They're like maybe 3 years old, 4 years old, and like they're just kind of monitoring them, and they got the biometric like markers kind of things on their faces, so they can see their expression, they can see if they're concentrating, if they're stimulated, all that sort of stuff. But like that was the kind of the childcare center, so it was a bit more playful because like you're not like really expecting the kids to do much there. But then they took it to like I think it's maybe about a 5th grade level, so the kids are like 10 or 11 or something like that, and like the kids have got these, they look like hairbands, okay, but like hairbands from like the 1980s that like I don't know,
EEG, okay,
yeah, they're EEG, yes.
Wow.
Yes, okay, so they've got these headbands on and it's got a light on the front of it, okay? And if the kid is concentrating, it flashes red.
Yeah.
It flashes red on the top. And if they're not concentrating, it's just like a normal white light kind of thing. And so like these kids are all like sitting in this classroom and they're all like got these really concentrated looks on their faces, and they're all trying to, I guess, focus, because you can see from the front of the classroom if they're concentrating or not, because like the light should be colored red. Now, not only is that happening, right, that like the light is flashing and it's like measuring their brain waves and stuff like that, but like it's constantly sending like a signal back to the teachers, kind of got this like control panel at the front of the class, and they're like measuring like and watching the kids in terms of like how much concentration they are like what level of concentration they're at 10-minute intervals. And so like this, if it dips below a certain level, like there are ramifications for the student. Now, like a lot of, they interviewed like parents and like teachers even about this, and like like this was from a Western perspective, right? Like I think it was like the Wall Street Journal that was doing this kind of this hit piece, let's call it, on AI education in China, and they were kind of like asking these parents questions like, "Are you not worried about them collecting like data on your kids and like what it could be used for and all that sort of stuff?" And the parents are like, "I don't care as long as my child is like concentrating, kind of thing. It's a good thing. Like they're collecting data that's going to, you know, further." Like develop the education system for all Chinese people, so who cares, like kind of thing. And like it does seem really dystopian, but like unless they cherry pick these people to say this stuff exactly, like some of them had a point. Like even the teachers were like, look, I don't really care if they're doing this, like it's kind of just an experiment to see like if this stuff is, you know, capable of improving education generally. But like they interviewed some of the kids, okay, and this is where it gets funny, and like some of the kids are kind of just like, oh yeah, like I've been able to kind of concentrate better because like I'm kind of being watched. And so like I understand. And these are like, you know, 10 or 11-year-olds, right? Mm-hmm. And they're just like, yeah, I can concentrate better now because at least I know what's going on with me. And like when I'm dipping out of like attention, and my teacher will come up and remind me and I can concentrate. And then there was like this other kid that was kind of like, oh, look, my parents get a reading of this. And like apparently the way that this system works is it's not just going to the teacher at the front of the classroom, but it's like the parents who are walking around like at home or at work that day are just like, oh my God, Johnny's not concentrated, God damn it, like kind of thing. And like this kid was just like, look, I don't like the system because like when I dip below certain levels of concentration as a daily average, my parents punish me when I get home. And I was just like, oh snap, like this poor kid, like the monitoring is good from a data collection standpoint, like, but from, I don't know, this invasive level at the individual, like you've got one kid who's just like, yeah, I can concentrate better, and you got this other one who's just like, my parents hit me when I go home at night, like kind of thing. So like you're like, yeah, that's like, you know, where do you draw the line with this sort of stuff? And like, you know, it's not only like, yeah, watching them all the time in the classroom, but like their brainwaves are being read. And like the one Western kind of commentator they had on this was like some neuroscientist from America. And they were kind of like, this EEG stuff is pretty sketchy at best. Like if the kid doesn't put it on right, or like scratches their ear or something, like it could completely confuse the readings. So like they were kind of like, okay, they're trialing this stuff, but like, are they getting any data of substance? But like, let's just use this as kind of a case study, as in like, this is where it's potentially going. And these are the capabilities of the AI and how this can be integrated into education, which is scary to think about. Like just generally scary, not like, oh my God, like how could they do this to children? It's just like, whoa, this is where we are potentially heading as a human race here.
I think the like there's a part of me that's genuinely fascinated in what data would actually come out of that.
Right.
Like I've got, you know, like it's intrigued, and we could actually learn really useful things about the educational process as a whole by taking a closer look at this data. The thing that I'd want to sort of draw attention to is there's a concept in psychology called the Hawthorne effect. And the idea behind it is that if you're watching someone, which you have to in order to be able to measure them or observe them, you know, in any meaningful way, their behavior might not be an accurate reflection of how they would perform if they weren't being watched. So there's a performative aspect to getting assessed or getting measured on pretty much anything.
But like, how tiring would that be as a student? Constantly performing, like if you are at school like 7 hours a day or something like that, and like you're constantly from the start of the day to the end of the day, must concentrate, like kind of like it's that. Not
reasonable or practical for students to sort of, you know, be constantly monitored or constantly evaluated. I think there are, and this is where it goes into controversial territory here. An argument could be made that, you know, the parents that drive their kids harder in terms of performing better at school, picking up, you know, learning instruments or you know, applying themselves in other ways at school, sometimes produce results in terms of the children and the range of capabilities that they display. You know, by the time finish school. But there's a potential for that stuff to manifest in other negative ways, as an adult, progresses through life. For example, stuff like perfectionism. Perfectionism can be a type of attitude or behavior that an adult exhibits if throughout the course of their life they were exposed to a lot of judgment, or they felt a lot of shame, or I'm simplifying something that's incredibly complex here.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to show how you can produce academic level results without fully understanding the implications of what it costs to get there. So I think from using that example you described around what would it feel like to have your concentration measured, if it's the case that if we operate under the assumption that if a student loses focus, it's not their fault.
Right.
If we started this avenue of inquiry just from that premise, then we will be able to alter the teaching method. We can alter the content. We can alter the structure of the engagement around it. There are so many other levers that we would be able to pull to change a student's learning experience, which might affect how engaged they are or how focused they are. But if the first port of call is you lost concentration in class, there's something wrong with you, go back and fix it, and that puts a lot of pressure on the student, in addition to learning the material as well. And I think what you would actually wind up creating in that situation is a cohort of students who get good at looking like they're focusing. But
like I can do that. Like if I really wanted to, if I was at work or something and my boss was just sitting next to me all day, I could look like I was concentrating really well on the outside, but I could be like in my mind, la 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 la, like kind of thing, But like it looks like these kids are also having to kind of simulate within their mind as well the fact that they're actually paying attention. I don't know how it's recording that, but like they can't be off in la la land. They have to be thinking about something, like kind of thing. Like it's next level, like in terms of the surveillance of the individual. And like, again, like you said, if you kind of premise it by saying, look, we're just monitoring to improve the system. We're not watching you. So like if you want to daze off and stare out the window, go for it. We don't care. We're just trying to get a reading of what goes on in the classroom. Yeah, I think, you could collect some interesting data there. But like if you're like Big Brother about it, and you're just like, all right, kids, see that camera up there? It's watching your face. If you guys start yawning, you're out. Like, and if like your little red light stops flashing, you're gone. Detention, like kind of thing. Like, that is going to have some very, very scary implications on that cohort of students that come out of that system. Like they're going to be, I don't know, like little soldiers or something like that, if they make it through without having like, some type of mental breakdown.
But we've stumbled across like, an aspect of learning where even though it might give us crucial understanding, we at least understand how it's possible to push it too far, and how it might actually impinge on a student's ability to learn or their overall health or a whole bunch of other stuff. And and I agree. I think that level of intrusion into a student's learning experience, we probably haven't justified adequately, the reason for that level of inquiry, particularly when there's so many other things within the education system that we could be measuring or pointing to, as ways to improve it. But if I can just paint a different picture, because this has been my experience using AI, to get better at writing, and writing's a bit of a unique one because in order for me to get better at it as a writer, I've got to do more reading as well. So, part of my, downtime away from studies involves the consumption of other media, which could potentially affect my studies. So what Claude was able to do for me was, based on everything that it knows about my writing, the stuff that I'm good at, the stuff that I'm not, to generate a personalized reading list, which tells me, this is the stuff that we want you focusing on. But it also gives me specific recommendations as to what to pay attention to as I'm going about reading this. Now, from the outside looking in, if AI is already running the classroom and in charge of my learning experience, and I'm now giving it control over what I do in my downtime, I'm giving it influence over what I do in my downtime. It might look like a more cohesive and integrated system, but where do we draw the line in terms of being too personal with that one as well? Like, how many aspects of our lives could potentially affect our learning experience and be useful information for the AI to have, but where do we want to put the boundaries in terms of how far it can reach into our lives to improve our education?
Yeah, and like it could literally just be with you like all of the time, shaping your life in order to get you to meet your educational goals. Like in ancient Rome, they took slaves from Greek who were like Greek philosophers and stuff like that. And like the upper classes in Rome would have like these solid ancient Greek philosophers and stuff like that, like geniuses in their society, but taken as slaves now. And they would teach like upper class Romans and stuff like that. And like when the Greeks were at the height of their civilization, they would have like people from Phoenicia and stuff like that, like coming into their culture, and they were the slaves and they were the ones that were teaching all of their children. But like they would have like this kind of slave in their household that was like responsible for teaching the kids. And so like he would live in the house and just constantly be tutoring the children and stuff like that. So like we could come to a point now with AI where it's not just like, teaching in the classroom, but like you ask it for a personalized curriculum, and like it suggests things to you, and like you said, it can monitor you, and like even in your downtime, like your downtime can be regulated by what's going to support your educational kind of objectives. Like I did what you told me to do. I went and said like, all right, Claude, I'm a little revolutionary. I want to be a better revolutionary. Make me a study plan. Make me a curriculum. And like, it was just like, here's the list. And I was just like, damn, that's a good reading list. And I had already read maybe like a third of the items on the essential revolutionary reading list kind of thing. And I was just like, thank you for like, kind of reinforcing my worldview here. But like it was like actually like, oh, when you go to this book, make sure you read this chapter, and we'll do like here's like an essay question on that. So when you're reading the text, you're not just kind of reading the text and be like, oh, that was nice. No, you reflect on it this way, and then I'm going to grade you. And if you don't do it right, you have to do it again. But like, it was basically like setting out a structure for me. And I was like, this is fucking incredible. Like someone could spend like half their life in an institution developing like a revolutionary style curriculum for kids. And this guy's just done, Claude's just done this in like 2 minutes, like with some nice prompts. And like, it was pretty solid. Like I just went online straight away and started downloading as many books as I can to then feed its suggestions into Notebook LM and just be like, crunch all of the articles and just be like, all right, now I can get some revolutionary kind of notes on like the curriculum that Claude's given me. And I was like, doing one of those weird AI feedback loops where you're feeding AI into AI to try and get you good results and stuff. But it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible how it shaped, and like I must say, it came up with a pretty good curriculum. I was pleasantly surprised. Let's just say.
That's awesome. To like, I imagine the level of specificity that it had in those.
Oh yeah, I was like, damn it,
mind blowing. Like,
it was.
It's
If you don't mind me asking, MysterE, tell me a text it gave you that you weren't expecting, that you think I should read.
Okay. Well, like, let me just pull it up. Give me a second. You continue the conversation, and I will find because there are obviously, like I said, there were texts in there that I hadn't read yet, but like I was happy that there was like a few of them at least that I had definitely come across. Let me find them for you.
No, you're all right. You might have already answered this, Kareem, but based on the entire conversation that we've had, like, what do you think AI, like, what effect AI will have on Okay, maybe in this context, I'll frame it as oversight versus individual learning. So, what I mean by oversight is like, your primary, secondary, and tertiary education versus you just doing individual learning. Like, on a broad scale, what effect will AI have on each of those camps? Like, what do you think?
Yeah. Look, I think that let me, I guess, share another vision for how what idealized education integration, looks like.
Please, go for it.
You would rock up to school on the very first day and have an AI agent that's kind of assigned to you. It would be part of a platform or a system that the school uses and assigns one to each student. And basically, this AI agent gets to hear everything that you hear, read everything that you read, and is familiar with everything that you write. So it collects data the entire way, sort of through your school. Now, ideally, if we're able to draw a compromise between this is the stuff that I have to learn in order to progress in school, but this is the stuff that I'm genuinely interested in, that I want to get an education in over the longer term, I think that those fields of supplementary education are going to be limitless. So and like we're going to start to see the emergence of skills and capabilities that are really difficult to master without a formal education.
Right.
We're going to start to see similar sorts of skill levels in other adults that have just been using AI to pursue their own education, that they didn't go and get a degree and whatever, or they didn't complete an online course. They've just got their own personalized like AI learning system, and it keeps track of like everything that's going on in school initially. But ideally, if you were able to sort of keep it in contact with you and have it in charge of everything education wise for the rest of your life, it would keep all your school history. If you went to uni, it would sort of absorb all those notes as well. And be able to engage with you and guide you around how can you better learn this information or demonstrate these skills that we're trying to impart to you. But it would sort of be an all encompassing platform that you could keep, which was in charge of your education for life.
Right. So I guess the dream is that it eventually turns into, so you go through the education systems, but you keep your education going, where what you end up doing is you have an AI education transcript, so an AIE that you take with you, and it's like, okay, well, I might have gone to these institutions, but as you can plainly see in my AIE, I've got all of these skills as well, and this is the reason why you should hire me, and that sort of thing.
It would be way better. Like let's the next evolution in this is the assessments that this education AI platform produces. If those assessments were useful to prospective employers, like if a prospective employer wanted to know, what's 4IS good at, what are they struggling with, how quickly can they learn new stuff, what careers might they be predisposed to, or what skill sets have they already got. If the system that I'm talking about was able to produce standardized assessment results, that are useful to employers, then it might look very different getting a job in the future versus going through an interview process or completing psychometric testing or anything like that. So,
but that's an interesting concept that you've just said, that you have an AIE possibly where not only does it keep track of like all the hard facts or the hard knowledge that you've learned in the courses that you've done, but it also records the soft skills that you know, which would be an interesting concept. It's like it's got everything there in a read 'em and weep read them in week fashion, which that would be interesting.
I think there's going to be some parts of the core educational experience that are absolutely irreplaceable. Like having a teacher. I think teachers are always going to be necessary. Particularly in primary and secondary institutions. But the role of the teacher is probably going to be reimagined somewhat, or the things that they're going to need to bring to the table.
Yeah, I'm seeing like AI manager as opposed to teacher here. I'm seeing like in a world where every 20 students in the classroom has their own ChatGPT model linked up to them, or let's just say large language model. I don't want to discriminate here. And like, they've all got a personalized like platform or curriculum, and the teachers, they're kind of monitoring everyone's personalized learning journey, let's say. Like, I think that's what I'm saying. Like, talking about this potentially changing the game for teachers and educators everywhere. Like, as opposed to them having to be the keeper of the keys for the entire classroom and being on top of all of the students. They could be monitoring almost.
But stuff like that social experience around learning, like being able to bounce ideas off peers, talk about subject matter, AI can replicate that to some extent and engage with you personally. Yeah. But you can't sort of replace that group learning atmosphere. That's a bit more difficult to sort of stumble across. And this is where like teachers who can engage in the applications of learning, who are able to sort of generate interest for what it is that they're teaching, who can inspire their students, or explain to them, if you learn this, these are the opportunities that it unlocks. This is the level that you're going to be performing at. And this is where this piece of information or piece of learning fits into the broader context of things.
Can I just pin you down for a second and twist your arm? Are you saying that there is a level of learning that happens in terms of collaboration between human beings that cannot be synthesized or replicated by a machine?
Okay, put it this way.
Like I'm not. There's not a problem with that. I just want to make sure.
But let
we're
me
on the same
give you
page here.
a systematic answer.
Yeah.
So I think if I'm sitting in a classroom, I'm hearing a friend of mine ask the lecturer a question about the subject material.
Yeah.
There's a chance I might have had the same question. There's a chance I might not have.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing, I guess, a lively debate around the content that we're learning. And for the most part, me sitting in a uni lecture or a tutorial or something like that, I'm able to acquire bits and pieces of information from that conversation that I'm hearing, even if I'm not engaged in the conversation at all. So there might be things that are sort of floating around a learning topic area of interest that are still relevant to it, that enrich my understanding of the material or my ability to engage with it.
Yeah.
Hanging out with friends, say after class or after school, or talking to other people about assignments that are coming up. I'm a huge advocate for peer-based learning. I found my own study experience incredibly enriched once I had, I guess, a core group of friends that were learning the same stuff as me at the same pace as me, because I was able to check my understanding of things against theirs.
Yep.
And vice versa. How much of that could AI replicate? I think it can replicate the one-on-one interaction and be focused specifically on helping me absorb the experience. If I wanted to, I could simulate using AI what types of questions a student might have while learning this material. So that might look like an FAQ. But I guess, where it probably really falls short is in its current iteration is, I don't. It's way harder for AI to inspire a student and sort of show them what the world could look like on the other end of developing this skill. I think that humans are always going to have a natural advantage in that, but particularly teachers. But my mind is going back to this one guitar teacher that I had when I was learning to play bass guitar. I'd have a go at it. I'd suck. He'd take it off me. He'd show me how to do that. But then at the end of it, he'd start doing all this other cool stuff on guitar, which I had absolutely no idea how to do. And in the beginning, I thought he was rubbing it in, like it's. I thought like he just wanted to like show he's awesome. So I asked him one day, like, why do you do that stuff? And he's like, I do this to inspire you. I want you to know, like what type of music you can create just holding a bass guitar. And that's when it really started to sink in for me, was that he was demonstrating mastery of skills that I was trying to acquire. So being able to show me what that looked like in action, and being able to show me what the possibilities were with that stuff, I didn't realize it at the time, but it wound up actually being really inspirational for me. So I'm picturing the role of teachers going forward as being able to as one that's a lot more focused on inspiring children as to why they should better engage with whatever education they're receiving, by saying this is what a finished product looks like. This is all the cool stuff you can do if you actually learn how to play guitar. So
yes, interesting. Sorry, I cut you off before 4AS because I wanted to jump down Kareem's throat on that one.
No, I was just going to make the comment before of, well, what you were describing with the 20 students using the large language model, blah blah blah. It sounds incredibly collaborative compared to the competitive standardized structure that we're used to, which would be very much a reinvention of how the education system works. Because, what we're used to now is in English, you're the top of the class or you're the 20th in the class. And it's really extracurricular or studying after school, or very specifically, it's a study group of with your mates and stuff like that. And even in that study group, it's not guaranteed that everyone's going to be studying anyway. In that version of what you guys were describing before of, the 20 students, anyone can kind of ask a question. You're kind of bouncing ideas as to, what happens in Othello and how is that relevant to us, et cetera, et cetera. If it's not, I think it's collaborative as well, where rather than you being lectured to by the teacher as to what are the main themes of Othello, like, sure, you might be given a summary by the teacher, but then with you and your mates, you can then be like, oh, well, we think it's this, and the AI goes, well, have you also considered this? Would you like to learn more? And maybe in that more collaborative setting, like, sure, you have a teacher, like Kareem was saying, that guides your hand as to what the important themes are, but because you're being prompted, no pun intended, to be more proactive, maybe that's better for the education system as a whole.
So I want to just, like, before we finish up, I want to just take this conversation in like a completely different trajectory or angle. So instead of using AI in education, I would like to kind of just ask how you guys would see the system, like the education system itself, changing. Maybe not with AI directly in the education process, but let's just say AI, which we know is coming, like revolutionizes work itself. So like, let's just say it's 10 years from now and AI has basically wiped out like a third, half, maybe 2/3 of the jobs that we have today. like in service sectors, in like, in maybe some forms of hospitality, in medicine, in like different things, maybe not in construction, I don't know, or things where you need kind of more physical elements to them. But like, let's just say a lot of industries have kind of been wiped out or on the verge of being wiped out potentially. And like, this goes back to what I was asking right at the start, because I was trying to wrap my head around this. But like, if you have a world where your education system is not about setting people up so they are productive members of society anymore, because labor has almost been like the capital labor relation for us has been like basically wiped out. Like, what do you have an education system for in a society like that? Like, are you just trying to make sure that people can communicate well with each other, read the stop signs, read the emergency signs, and kind of participate? Maybe they should read because they need to vote, and we're in a democratic society. And maybe they should know like basic biology and basic science so they can interact with their planet around them, and like they could be good, I don't know, good global citizens or good citizens of the earth or something like that. Like, how do you see an education system going in a world where AI has just kind of wiped out the premise for like education in an industrial sense?
I'm happy to go first. Maybe let's. I want to look within the education system as it kind of stands right now. There's kind of two extremes. There's obviously the extreme that you're referring to, MysterE, where you're given the hard skills in order to be a chemical engineer, or whether to be an accountant and that sort of thing. And it's through your work and experience that you kind of learn the soft skills in order to interact in those kind of jobs, and to make you a productive member of society. However, the other extreme of that, which I feel like is probably the much more benevolent side of things, is, when you do go to these education systems, the soft skills, or at least the skills that you learn from these courses, is such things like critical thinking skills, and you're able to kind of navigate society, and also navigate between the lines within society, because you are able to kind of suss out what you need in order to navigate this world. So maybe let's imagine that it goes into the direction, at least, of the would you like to know more individual agent, AI agent world, where it has that AIE transcript. Maybe what might end up happening is, rather than you being trained in the education system to be a good worker, maybe it swings the complete opposite direction, where you are educated and you learn things in your specialized field in order to be a much more critical thinking citizen within society, and you are an expert in your field because you want to kind of do what's best for society and that sort of thing.
You have like a passion for it or something, yeah.
Exactly. And to be honest, it's probably a much more leftist / communist / socialist way of thinking about education moving forward.
Yeah.
But maybe that, like, that sort of band-aid approach that you're referring to, maybe it might cause a lot more good rather than harm. What do you think, Kareem?
I think I understand the question in terms of like why do we need education if we're working towards a system where we're not living to work, where we're motivated by other things apart from our basic survival needs. What role does education sort of play in that world?
In that world, yeah.
So it's distinguishing between the education that I get, that enables me to be productive to society, or enables me to get a job, or to create value for someone else on some level, versus what type of education do I actually want, or what type of education do I actually need in order to live the life that I want to live, and talk to people, or navigate the world respectfully, like get my needs met from interactions with other people and be able to satisfy other people's needs. So what you're proposing would be a total reimagination of the educational system, but I propose that we'll probably find similar sorts of elements rising to the top, even without profit motive, even without that
ding, 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 ding.
Capitalist way of looking at things. Is that like there's still research that tells us the people that learn this stuff get to enjoy a higher quality of life. Now, the factors that might be influencing that could change over time, as could our entire social structure system. But the remaining questions that are left for me in that world are: do I feel equipped enough to be able to do what I want with my life? Mm-hmm. Now, that's going to look different for everyone, but on some level, if I've completed my primary and secondary school education, I should feel like equipped enough to be able to go out and make a life that I want to live.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, whether that involves getting a job or an additional type of education, or doing something that I genuinely want to do. Let's say I'm prepared to work for free. I think that a lot of people still derive a basic sense of satisfaction, or derive parts of their identity around how productive they can be, or what they do for work. No, I don't think that stuff is going anywhere anytime soon.
No.
I think that there does seem to be some sort of universal, innate, basic desire to be a part of society, and to be able to contribute meaningfully within that society. Whether the motivation for that is, I know I'm valuable to society because I made a lot of money, if you want to use that as an indicator. Or whether or not, people are more directly connected to the ways in which they're benefiting society. But, I don't, while we need to start completely reimagining it and thinking about it in different ways, there's a part of me that believes that a lot of the stuff that we already have in the education system, we're going to wind up keeping because it genuinely is useful on levels that we don't fully understand yet.
Yeah, I think in order to live in like an advanced industrial world like we have at the moment, which is increasingly becoming digital, there is certain elements that you need to have in order to be able to kind of traverse your landscape, in order to survive in like kind of the modern world. And so, there are basic kind of elements that you need to learn. I definitely agree with that. Like I went to Uluru once, and there was kind of like an indigenous guide there, and like they were kind of teaching us, I guess, some things about like the landscape and things, and like someone asked them a question about like a really specific topic, and they were like, they turned around really bluntly, but like for them it was completely normal, but they just turned around really bluntly and they were like, I'm not going to tell you the answer to that. And like the person was just like, oh, wow, ouch, like kind of thing. Why wouldn't you answer the question? It was just like about like, I don't know, a tree or something like that. And they were like, well, you don't need to know. Like you're basically in this world, in our terrain out here, in this semi-arid, this almost desert environment. Like we exist out here and we know how to survive. So we know what that tree is good for. But like you, tourist, you're going to go home tomorrow and you're never going to step in a desert ever again. So like basically you're like a 3-year-old for us. I'm actually taking you out here like I would take out a 3-year-old and like just make sure that they don't step on something that might kill them. So like they don't need to know. Their understanding of the world was based on whatever basic level of understanding they needed to survive in the desert, basically. So like, I think there is a basic level of understanding that we need to know, I guess, now in the 21st century, living in an urban environment, living in a suburban environment, in order to be able to survive here. And like, our education system should provide us with that basic level of understanding, and there's certain traits that we will get from our education system that will carry on into a world where AI has basically replaced labor for the most part. But like, the thing that you touched on there, and I want to ram that home, is you talked about like, people want to feel like they are in a meaningful way contributing something. So like, you don't have to contribute because you're productive, like you said, in an economic sense. You can contribute because you want to contribute to society. That's something I agree. That's innate to humans as social animals, and something that will never escape us. And like, I'm just going to say, I would prefer to live in that type of world. Let me just put it out there.
Well, the idea of being able to contribute something meaningfully could be as simple as sharing an experience, as sharing your human experience. Like, if you find a way to be able to communicate your experience, doesn't matter what medium you use. It could be words, could be art, could be music, could be a whole bunch of other things. If you have like a unique human experience that you're wanting to share, that in and of itself could be valuable to other people. I mean, its value may be affected by the technical elements, like how well did you package it together. Is there something that other people actually want to hear about? You start taking into account genres and styles and things like that. But the idea that your experience alone, if it's sufficiently unique, or but perhaps you've been able to practice a level of vulnerability around it that gives deeper insights as to how humans navigate really emotionally complex spaces, then it's entirely possible for us to live in a world where the value that you create is simply through sharing experiences that might uplift and might educate someone else and might inspire someone else.
Yeah.
I had two directions I was thinking about proposing. One was having a chat about what sorts of new skills and capabilities we're going to see emerge within the AI revolution. Like, what skills and capabilities could potentially arise out of the future we're headed towards, that aren't sufficiently captured by existing educational institutions, or we're not sufficiently prepared for it. The other direction I was much more interested in hearing both your takes on was, how does education facilitate social mobility, as like movement between classes or access to a better quality of life? How does it facilitate reduction of inequality? And is the AI revolution going to be a good thing or a bad thing for inequality as it pertains to education? Happy for you guys to choose whichever direction.
Well, to be honest, I can tell you off the bat that my education for social mobility, I can tell you right now that from my personal experience, my mother-in-law is she's retired now, but she was a lawyer, and she was a lawyer that grew up in the free education system under Gough Whitlam. And it's not like she came from a flashy background or anything, but it's like, you guys obviously know that I'm one of the rank and file members within ALP, and because of that social mobility of having free education under Gough Whitlam, that's the reason why and when it's coming up to an election or that sort of thing, and take into consideration that my partner's father was a psych that got tenure here in Australia around the same time as when Gough Whitlam was in government. So he got a lot of advantages and social mobility when he came over. Like that's the reason why whenever it's coming up to an election and all of that, they're always on my case, being like, for AS, I think Labor should improve on this, and I think Labor should improve on that, because having a good government and having the education in order to have a good life is really important. So I can just speak from personal experience and the anecdotes from my family that education is important for social mobility. So yeah, that's definitely what I have to say to that, Kareem.
I think it's definitely important in the system that we have at the moment, where as you've alluded to, inequality is a factor. And inequality is a factor in the sense that it is based typically in the capitalist system on wealth or income inequality. And your kind of social status is defined by your wealth or your income level. So if education gives you access to a greater income level, which then you can turn into a greater accumulation of wealth generally, while maintaining a higher income too, I'm sure that's great. That is a marker for social mobility in the type of society that we live in. So social mobility in an economic world, like a capitalist world, is being able to move to a level of society where you live in enough comfort because of your monetary prowess that you can live a more comfortable life. So maybe we're not just talking about, being a trillionaire or a billionaire or something like that, but at least just living with a level of comfort where it doesn't matter what happens to you, someone gets sick, you want to go on a fancy holiday, you can just afford to do it anytime. Let's just think of social mobility like that in a really basic sense. So yes, education correlates to that, because in a society like Australia's, let's use for an example, we're an advanced culture and we're kind of post-industrial society. A majority of persons aren't laborers in a production sense. They're usually professionals and in the service sectors and things like that. And so they're typically people that have some level of education post primary, secondary schooling. So maybe tertiary level or something like that. And so yes, tertiary level education and higher education is going to be an indication of social mobility in a societal structure like this. But if you take away, just to borrow a line from you, Kareem, the profit motive and things like that, what is an indication of social mobility then? Is it the fact that maybe you are in the top 10% of your industry? So let's say you're really interested in, I don't know, just picking at random here, organizational psychology or accounting or something like that. If you were the top 10% in your field, would you be a celebrity or something like that? And you would have social status because every time you walk down the street, people would throw themselves at you and be like, oh my God, it's that Kareem guy. Oh my God, kind of thing. And and that would be, what was that? They do? Okay, right.
My dream.
Oh, your dream. I thought you said they already do. Okay, fair enough. Let's go for a walk sometime.
Oh, so that's the reason why they call you Kareem the Dream.
There it is. It came back. Yes. I knew that introduction was done for a reason. If that's social mobility though, in that world where we're kind of post the whole money factor and everything comes back down to a social setting, then yeah, social mobility might be different for education purposes at that point, where your education is defined by how sick you can become in terms of specializing in your niche or your industry. So I think social mobility, if we use the word social and we pin on that, is massively affected by your education. You can even make the case as an athlete or something. you're just like, by training, I know you're training your body physically, but like most athletes don't stop there, professional athletes. They're like, you know, they're like sports scientists as well. They're not just like really good runners or really good ball catchers or something. Like they are at the top of their game in terms of how they know their body works and stuff like that. So like, I think educating yourself is possibly like in a human sense, like that's what we do. We labor. We like learn new skills and we develop them and we get lost in our creative capacities and then we create all these wonderful things and then we pass them on to each other. Like I think education is hand in hand with social mobility almost on any scale in terms of social organization.
Well, let me put a slightly different spin on it, because the question around what constitutes social mobility, like at the moment, like you've raised education as being one sort of indicator, you know, towards trying to gauge, you know, a person's level of social mobility. But you know, if I were to start from the ground up in an idealized world, I'd be asking the questions, you know, am I equipped enough to be able to do what I want to do? Like can I spend my life doing the kinds of things that I feel are enjoyable, and hanging out with the type of people that I want to be hanging out with? And I'd argue that, you know, the people that are ranking higher on that scale are more socially mobile people. So you know, the next question that arises from there is you know, like let's you know, paint the picture of a post-capitalist world, you know, where you know, we've all got our basic needs looked after, you know, by the system. The question around, you know, what constitutes a good life? You know, what is a life well lived? You know, if it doesn't have anything to do with production or contribution to society or anything like that, I suspect an element to that will still remain regardless of what type of system we're in, because like, we like looking after each other. It feels good. But the question around, you know, what do I want my life to look like given limitless possibilities? Once we've figured out the range of different answers to those questions, then it's probably a bit easier to start asking the question, okay, what does it take to get there? What level of capability do I need to be able to live the life that I want to live? What are the specific skills involved in that? How can I learn that stuff? And if it were possible to take, you know, the endless variation between, you know, things that people want to learn and the learners themselves, you know, then I think, you know, what a school curriculum looks like could be very different in the future, and even on some level could be personally tailored, you know, to people. So the school already knows what your development trajectory looks like, the things that you need to work on, you know, and what your dreams and hopes and aspirations are, you know. But I mean, kids change their minds as well. You know, I've gone through how many different career changes in my.
Yeah, I was going to say, not just kids, people. I'm constantly changing my mind about things like all the time.
Yeah,
even halfway through doing them.
It's you know, but the beauty of it at the moment is that, you know, I guess the world that we're headed towards is, I can decide that I want to make a change. I can have access to the education that I need to learn the things that I want to learn about in order to be able to pursue a career in pretty much whatever I choose.
Yeah.
So all that really matters is, you know, am I willing to apply myself to acquiring the education to begin with? And that's going to be different for everyone. Some people are going to reach the end of high school and be like, I am never touching another book again.
Yeah.
Other people are going to be like, I'm going to be reading until the day that I die.
Like, yeah.
You know, and everything in between. So.
Horses for courses. And like, I think that's the beauty of, if we could summarize the conversation, like the beauty of a potential AI education system is like really getting down with what the person needs, and then even potentially what they want as well at any given point. Like what a magical education system we would have if it was that dynamic. And like, I just don't see, unfortunately, to answer maybe another part of the question that you had there about like kind of the control of AI and stuff like that. Unfortunately, in the AI world in which we are developing at the moment, and this is a very Marxist interpretation of things, and I'll just leave it with this only, and maybe we can talk about this further in another podcast, but who owns the means of production? Well, basically controls society. And currently, if we have these AI systems that are being kind of, I guess, conglomerated in the hands of maybe a few big organizations, will it give us this liberating effect that we're talking about here? Should we not socialize, basically, these large language models, these AI systems, as they are being developed, so they are available to all people, so then people can use them socially, as opposed to kind of them being hidden behind private property rights, and then some company being like, I've got this sick AI system, you can have it, like, kind of thing.
This like, you raise an important point here, and where I'm at with my understanding of it is, the creators of the large language models, so your OpenAI, your Anthropics, a whole bunch of other large language models out there, are granting access for free to a large language model. So it might not be the latest one. It might not have the biggest context window. It might not have access to all the full functionality and features that you get by paying for it. But each one of them at least want to make a model that's either cheap or free for the public to use. Now, constructing your own learning journey as it stands is doable, but you need some level of technical knowledge about how to construct a learning experience, or like some level of knowledge about what you want to learn, or the directions it could go, or like in my case, it wasn't intuitive that to set up my writing journey in a way where I would get it to produce an artifact, and I would add that back to the project. So I've kind of created a system that allows for continuous feedback, that allows for continuous updating of the knowledge, without using those features within Claude. It wouldn't have been able to update its understanding of where I'm at in my learning journey. It would only have an understanding of where I started. So now, not everybody has access to projects in Claude or custom GPTs in ChatGPT, but like that's sort of the first step that I see between taking publicly available models and using them specifically for learning purposes. Like, if you didn't do any of the, if you didn't include the bells and whistles around assessment and stuff, you would be looking at each conversation as though it's its own conversation.
Which is annoying.
You'd have to manually track what you learned out of that. You'd have to manually track what your performance is. And you could still receive a whole lot of useful knowledge or useful information imparted by the AI based on stuff that you're wanting to learn about. But in terms of like systematically creating that learning experience and
over time.
And drafting the entire vision for what that learning experience looks like, you need to start to be familiar with the more advanced. I mean, theoretically, there should be other platforms that come out after this date that have like taken into account every aspect of the learning. So, I mean, ChatGPT specifically for learning will exist one day. Claude for learning will exist one day, and it'll be hyper optimized for that. It won't involve me sort of fiddling around with buttons or needing to, update context or any of that stuff. It'll know what to do the moment I rock up. What types of learning to facilitate on that platform? again, could be really individual, but ideally we'd want it validated by experts to know that we're on the right track. But I think probably a final thought from me on why all this stuff's important is you need to know how to interact with the AI to be able to get what you want out of it. And the world that we're headed towards, where AI is able to do more and more things, might take a reimagining of our ability to talk to the AI in terms of the kinds of opportunities that it opens up. Now, at the moment, it does like launching a subject in school, how to talk to ChatGPT, not at the top of the priority list for anyone. It's a function of where we stand in society, today. 10, 20 years down the track, once we realize all the different cool things that AI can do, and potentially now we've got access to human capabilities that rely on AI to bring to life. So that's what true augmentation looks like. Take the computer, it can't talk by itself. Take the human, it can't talk by itself. Combine them together in this magical recipe, we've now got a new hybrid skill or capability or thing that humans plus AI can do together that neither one of them can do by themselves. So there's a part of me that's more interested in what's happening in that space, because that's the stuff that's going to be pushing frontiers, in terms of revolutions within industries, revolutions within societies. So there's a lot to look forward to on that front.
A lot of exploring to be done on that front, I would say.
I'm doing my part. You guys
We know you are. We know you are.
And gentlemen, with that was a good discussion, and that brings us to our final segment. What's that synthwave art? Do any of you guys want to?
Did you type in Daft Punk in there somewhere for IS? Because it looks
I did not.
Pretty Daft Punky, hey? Because their first album, their debut album was called Homework, and I thought that had something to do with education.
See, the funny thing, yeah, go for it.
But my first guess at this photo is immersive learning experience.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Good crack. But I
changed my answer.
But AI teaching us that learning and cooperation will lead us to the new frontier of education.
Wow.
These prompts are getting longer, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. They're way more complex.
Glad to see you've been having fun with it.
Is that the frontier out the window there, that hilly landscape potentially?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm assuming it prompted not only frontier, it's got both of the frontiers. I think it's got the Wild West in there, and I think maybe it's done some sort of Star Trek-y Daft Punk thing where it's the space, the final frontier. It's basically done this weird Star Trek thing with Daft Punk themed, where these two characters are basically dancing around the world.
Yeah, pretty much. It's Daft Punky, and it's even got them in like some pretty nice pants too. I
love the white shoes.
Yeah, the whole shebang. Thank you, AI.
Yeah. Okay, and with that, everyone, remember to keep thinking and keep learning. And also, we should probably make the quick plug, MysterE, that we also now have Discord. We have a Discord, Mount Movement. So if you guys that have enjoyed the podcast and want to join us over in Discord for a good old discussion, please do so. I'll make sure to give you the link again, MysterE, so you can put it probably
I'll put it in the description for sure.
So yeah, just remember everyone to keep thinking and keep learning. And Kareem, again, thank you for joining us. Kareem the Dream.
Yes.
And to sign us off, I'll give it to you, Mr. A.
Thank you very much, 4AS. Thank you very much, Kareem, for joining us. And yes, to all of you out there, if you have enjoyed this episode, give it a like, subscribe, leave a comment. You know the drill. And until next time, please remember, I am, you are, we are a MysterE.